Good morning. How are you guys today? Good. Today, we're going to talk about Jesus being our King, Christ the King's Son, that we call it, and how Jesus is our King, and King over everything. So I got to ask you first, you guys know what a king is, right? What is a king? Tell me what a king does. Okay, king lives in a castle. That's true. Does Jesus live in a castle? He kind of does. Yeah, he does, actually. You know where his castle is? Actually, you know what? Let's get back to that one. In heaven? Okay, yeah. Think of a huge castle in heaven. That's kind of a cool thought, isn't it? What else does a king do? A king doesn't just live in a castle. He's the ruler of the kingdom. What do you mean by that? What does a ruler do? Okay, they make the rules. Does Jesus make rules? Yeah, he does. You know what those rules are? 10 Commandments. Yeah, he's the one who gave those. And they're all very good. They're all intended to keep us safe and healthy and happy. What else does a ruler do? Wears a crown. You're right. Imagine if Jesus wore a crown. If he does wear a crown, it's probably a pretty awesome crown. Right? In fact, we just sang Crown with Many Crowns, so I imagine he probably does. What else does a ruler do? Let me ask you a question. What if a ruler or a people was being attacked by other people? What would a ruler do? What would a king do? He would have knights to save him. Okay, maybe he would send his people off to war, but a really good king? I think of like King David. He would go off to war with them. And King David would fight for them. Does Jesus fight for us?
Yes.
Yeah, he does, right? Did you know that Jesus is fighting for us right now? There's a lot of things that want to hurt us. The devil, among the worst. And he really wants to hurt us, but Jesus is protecting us all the time. And who do you think's stronger? Yeah, absolutely. And that's why, really, we'll never get really hurt, because Jesus will always be there to protect us. But he did something else. He did something that was even more important, so that even when we do get hurt, even then, a long time from now, we do die, we're still going to live. We're going to live in heaven, in his castle, forever. Why? Do you know why? Because he died on the cross to take away our sins. Our King traded his life for ours. He went to battle, really, and he traded his life. He died so that we could live forever in heaven. Now, I'm going to tell you something else that's pretty cool. You talk about heaven and the castle in heaven. Do you know where Jesus says his real castle is? No. If you know, it's us. Yeah, he built us. We're his castle. He's living with us right now. And maybe we don't see his glory. One day we will. But we know we'll always be with him because he's our King. And today we're going to thank him for that. So why don't we fold our hands? Dear Jesus, we thank you for loving us so much, that you give us good rules to follow, that you protect us from our enemies, and that you gave your life so that we would live with you now and forever in heaven. We thank you for this and ask you to help us remember this every day of our lives so that we live with joy and confidence. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. Thanks for coming up. You can go sit with your families. We will continue by singing verses 3 and 4 of our hymn.
Glorious in the strife
Grace and peace to you from God our Father, and from our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. I've heard it said that you should never meet your heroes. I don't know if you've ever heard that. I'll explain it to you if you haven't, or at least how I understand it. You may have heroes that you build up in your mind that the day you would meet them would be just a wonderful day. You would love them, they would love you, it would be a great day. But you build that up so high that you will almost always be disappointed. And I think about that and how that might play out. And maybe you have heroes, or maybe just people you admire. I think of a couple of people who I think would be very fascinating to me. Just to pick a few, let's start with Alexander the Great. I think what he accomplished and the things he did, the life that he lived, he'd be very fascinating. He lived about 350 years before Jesus was born. And what he did, by the age of 29, to give you the gist of it, he conquered more of the known world than anybody ever had or ever will, or ever has, at least up to this date. 29. Conquered most of Asia, Europe, India, North Africa, by the age of 29. The things that he had seen, the things he had done, it would be fascinating to have a conversation. Of course, I think if I would try to start the conversation with Alexander the Great, he might look at me and go, why am I talking to you? 48 years, what? How many countries have you conquered? So it would be a little intimidating and probably wouldn't be as fun as I would think. Or to that matter, maybe Martin Luther. I think he'd be very fascinating to talk to for all that he did, for what he saw, and obviously for what his work means to us. But again, at age 35 is when he began reforming the church, or at least got used into it. 39, he translated the entire New Testament from Greek into German and published it. By 51, granted I'm not there yet, he translated the entire Bible from Hebrew to German, or Hebrew and Greek to German. And that is on top of preaching over 4 different sermons a week and teaching at a university and leading the worldwide reformation of the Christian church. And I think, maybe I should be getting up right here. It would be great to meet him, but I couldn't help but think he would look at me and go, what are you doing? And so maybe I wouldn't want to. Maybe I'm being neurotic, probably, but I think it would be very intimidating. Maybe best not to meet them face to face. Of course, you can flip that coin and maybe think of people you'd like to meet, a little more contemporary, for some noble reasons, perhaps, an athletic hero, somebody that you'd like to emulate, admire, or a movie star, somebody that plays a role that you really love and you think that this would be a great guy to meet, and then you do, and you realize he is not a great guy. And that image that you held up is crushed, and you never think of that person the same way again. And so perhaps it's better just not to meet your heroes and to just imagine them the way that you do. Otherwise, you will undoubtedly be disappointed. Except for today. In the text that we read today, we see a young man, who meets someone great, maybe not yet his hero, but somebody he is certainly afraid to meet for what it might mean. And yet when he does, on this day, this beautiful day, the sun is shining, the birds are chirping, the air is sweet, and everything comes together, and it is the greatest day when he meets his king and realizes that his king is more than he could have ever imagined. What's even better is that his king doesn't look at him as if he is something less, something little. He doesn't look at him with any kind of shame or disgust, but with more value than he could possibly have hoped for. This day with the king is the account of the thief on the cross. And I want to read that to you again, as it's recorded in Luke chapter 23. The people stood watching. The rulers were ridiculing him, saying, he saved others, let him save himself. This is the Christ of God, the chosen one. Soldiers also made fun of him. Coming up to him, they offered him sour wine, saying, if you are the king of the Jews, save yourself. There was also an inscription written above him, this is the King of the Jews. One of the criminals hanging there was blaspheming him, saying, aren't you the Christ? Save yourself and us. The other criminal rebuked him. Don't you fear God, since you are under the same condemnation? We are punished justly, for we are receiving what we deserve, for what we have done. But this man has done nothing wrong. Then he said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus said to him, I tell you the truth. Today you will be with me in paradise. This is God's word. So, this beautiful day, wonderful day, when this man meets his king. Didn't start out that way. Of course, meeting the king, the day with the king, never starts off that way for anybody. I'm going to get back to that. But this day, for this man particularly, was a bad day. This man was being crucified. Now, we could stop by asking why. How did he get to this point? The obvious answer, well, he was a robber, a thief. And I should point out the difference between the two. This man was a robber, which meant that he was more than a thief. A thief is one who might pick your pocket or sneak in at night so you can't see him, take your stuff. A robber is somebody who is willing to beat you or perhaps even kill you to take your stuff. A violent criminal. This man did this. And I am going to venture to say, and this is a guess on my part, so take it for what it is, that this is not the first time the man has done this. We usually don't get caught the first time. This man has probably done this for a while, but now he has been caught and convicted and crucified. Let's back up a little bit, though. Why? Why was this man a robber? You can look at so many different sociological studies on why people do what they do. It comes down simply to this. This man was a human being. That's where it starts. This man was a human being who was born sinful. Everybody is. You look back to the beginning when Adam and Eve were in the image of God, that changed. And when that changed, Adam and Eve gave birth to children in their likeness. Sinful, born corrupted. And that sinful nature is a selfish nature. And that selfish, sinful nature will always express itself in a selfish way. It always does. Even when a person serves other people, generally it's because that will help them in some way. This man had, for whatever circumstances he lived in life, whatever circumstances were placed upon him or he put himself into, realized that in himself, to serve himself, he needed to rob and hurt others. It was a selfish nature that manifested itself, that expressed itself in robbery. It all began at the beginning and got to this point. Now, this man was crucified. And understand that crucifixion served two purposes. This man could have been arrested. This man could have been put in prison or could have been executed in a different way. But crucifixion served two purposes. One, it put upon this man the worst possible pain they could imagine. A long and painful execution. But it also put this man on display for all the world to see. As a lesson to them of what might happen if you do these things, but also to bring shame upon this person. Not just physical pain, but also emotional pain, as everybody watched. You know, Jesus in John chapter 3 talks about how everyone who does evil hates light and will not come into the light for fear that their deeds will be exposed. This man didn't want to be caught. This man didn't want to be seen. This man didn't want to be looked at by the world. And we can get that. Nobody who does something wrong wants it to be known. But now it was known to everyone. And he couldn't hide it. And I imagine the shame that he must have felt as he looked at those that maybe he knew. Maybe brothers and sisters, his parents, who tried to raise him right. And now here he hangs. And how does he respond? Well, there's a beautiful response here, but let's be honest and look at the first response he gives. This is a response that's given in Matthew. In Matthew, excuse me a second. In Matthew, we read what is said first. When the people were ridiculing him, the chief priests and the soldiers, in the same way the robbers who were crucified with him also heaped insults on him. And before this beautiful confession, this robber also insulted Jesus. and made fun of Jesus and ridiculed Jesus. Why? Because that's what sin does. And it's wrong, and I'm not saying that it isn't, but before we judge him too harshly, before we become judgmental ourselves, let's recognize that that is what sin does. Adam and Eve. When they sinned, what did they do? This woman who you gave me, God, she gave me this fruit. Eve then turns to the devil. He did this to me. When confronted with God, sin will always lash back out. Because sin, which has defended itself and served itself for so long, is confronted with its wrong, it will always lash back out. And that's what it's doing here. This man is saying, God, you have done this to me. Finding some way to justify his own pain, justify his actions, lashing out at those around him, lashing around at Jesus. Sin does. And it does it this morning. It does it as he looks at Jesus, but then eventually it wears itself out in the presence of God. God allows this sin to run its course, and he very quietly, very powerfully, with his example, with power that he demonstrates and displays, breaks this man. And this man is able to recognize, perhaps for the first time in a long time, that this is nobody's fault but his. Nobody put him here. This was him. This was his fault. And he shares it with his, perhaps his colleague, maybe just a man who happened to be there at the same time. We are getting what we deserve. Don't you fear God? Because he was hanging there not just before the world, but before God, and he finally got that. And that was a beautiful thing. Because when he got that, he realized what he needed, and he turned, if only with a glimmer of hope, if only with a flicker of faith, he turned with faith to Jesus and says, Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom? And Jesus eagerly says to him, I tell you the truth, today you will be with me in paradise. And you know that Jesus has been waiting for this moment since the beginning of time. Because he has known his people since the beginning of time. And now, having broken this man down, he is able to show him who he truly is. Someone who does not look on him with shame, someone who does not look on him with disgust, but only with love. Who is not ashamed to be in his presence, who is not ashamed to talk to him and to speak with him, to embrace him, and he will live with him in eternity. And this day became a wonderful day. And if only in part, for this man, the birds began to sing and the sun began to shine and the world was a little brighter. Only for a while. And then his new day began. As he saw the face of his king and lived with him in glory. It's a beautiful story. It's not just a story, it's truth. It's an account. And it's our story. Because as specific and as awful as this story may be, it's the same as ours. You know, I mentioned earlier that every day with the king begins with pain. It never begins pleasant. For the same reason, because we are born in sin, and that sinful nature is a selfish nature. And if you look at your life, you can see this, if you look at your life honestly, how that selfish nature will find different courses of action. The way we think, the way we act, the way we talk. It may manifest itself in robbery, or thievery, or greed, as we pursue the things of this world. It may manifest itself, express itself in the desires of the flesh, lust, and justifying how we express that, however we express that. Or the things that we pursue, gluttony, or the food that we love, and the drink that we cherish, whatever. That desire to serve ourselves is within all of us. And we can defend it, we can justify it, and we can hide it to the best of our ability. But inevitably, it will be confronted with God. And when it is confronted with God, its first reaction will always be to lash out. And to say, how dare you? How dare you judge me? Whether it's to a person who represents God or to God himself. And to speak of God's word as if it's archaic and outdated, old-fashioned, biased against me for whatever reason, or just plain wrong. He lashed out at God. And yet God is patient. And God is persistent. And God continually, lovingly breaks us down until we see who we are. And that is an awful day. But when we do, we recognize our need, and we recognize that that need has been fulfilled. And we hear the words of Jesus. I did not come to serve, to be served, but to serve. To give my life as a ransom for many, a ransom for you. Or as the east is from the west, I have removed your transgressions from you. Or as I love to hear again and again from 2 Corinthians chapter 5 as Jesus speaks through his apostle Paul. God, the Father, made him, Jesus,